The question of today is, what is your opinion on Donald Trump?
I wouldn't be a fan of Donald Trump.
And why is that?
I personally would disagree. I'd be more to the left. He's more right wing, so that would be my reason. I do think that a lot of people disagree with Donald Trump, but they don't really know why. I would accept that point, though.
Yeah, that's a fair conceit. So you would have voted for Hillary, say, if you were in the US?
I would not have voted for Hillary.
Okay, so who would you have voted for?
I don't think that in that US election there would have been a candidate who I would have voted for.
Okay, that's fair enough. Ideally, or even in the history of US elections, or of maybe people for the future, like candidates for the future who you might like to see running against Trump in 2020?
I think I'd like to see Bernie Sanders running against Trump in 2020. I think that would be a really interesting debate, because I think Bernie is seen as a man of the people for the left, and I suppose people see Trump as a man of the people for the right, and it would be two kind of different kind of populism clashing, and I think that would be interesting to see in a debate.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. I think Bernie should have got the nomination in the last election, and he was kind of screwed over by Hillary and the DNC really badly. So what's your opinion or your sentiments or thoughts on the current US border situation with the wall and all that?
I do think it's a bit hypocritical of the Democrats, even the likes of there's videos of Nancy Pelosi and Schumer literally saying what Trump has said. And I saw a video on Facebook last night actually where it was like people were just reading out statements, people like, who do you think this was? And they were like, oh no, that was Chuck Schumer. And I do think it's after been the border situation it's a difficult one, because I think that America, I think, needs to take responsibility for its policies in South America, and I suppose the devastation it's having. But I suppose the country also does have its right to protect its borders. Yeah,
I really think if there are no borders, there's no country, and things will just go into decline if it's a free for all, essentially. What would you think on that point?
I suppose, obviously, in limited resources, and I suppose I would feel that the resources should be trying to be fairly distributed among as many people as you possibly can, and
yeah. I mean, you need the right infrastructure to support the right amount of people, surely.
Yeah, I suppose an interesting thing actually is people don't seem to criticise Australia, who have a stricter border or immigration policy, and they're not criticised at all. They would be much stricter.
Japan too.
Yeah. I think that's something that they kind of get off scot-free with it, to be honest. They're never criticised, and they have a really strict immigration policy.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of power playing in Western media. I think there are a lot of wealthy investors who have a stake in perpetuating certain narratives in Western mainstream media, and that has kind of led to a lot of hysteria, especially in the last election and since in the US. And even in Europe, we have a fairly biased media that seems to be largely controlled, and there are big money investors like George Soros, for example, who have large stakes in media companies who are creating the narratives that everybody else just eat up.
Something I find very hypocritical of that, again, is as we saw during the 2015 refugee crisis, the EU handled it appallingly, and then they criticised Trump, who I don't think he's handled it correctly, but neither is the Western states of Europe. I think they're both doing it wrong, and it's unfair to just point the finger at Trump and say that he's doing it wrong. You're also doing it wrong, and they need to stand up and, I suppose, take account of that. There was a complete breakdown of the Dublin regulation in 2015, and they just could not. And the Western states didn't want to know about it, to be quite honest, and they're not criticised about it either.
Yeah, on that point, what do you think of the developing migrant crisis in Europe?
I think it's a very tricky thing. I suppose we need to take, responsibility for, we allow US warships our warplanes to stop in Shannon, and they go over, and obviously they wreak havoc in the Middle East, and I think we need to take responsibility for that. I think other Western states as well need to take responsibility for, like France. France dropped drone strikes in Syria, but then they kick up a fuss when these people have no homes and they want to come to Europe. So I think that just needs to be a bit of responsibility taken on that.
Yeah, do you think it is unfair how there is like obfuscation or confusion between refugees and economic migrants, and how we have like open border policies which seem to be all inclusive, but we're not focusing on those who need help, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think like even in Ireland here at the moment, like we've taken in, I could be wrong with this, but I believe it's 600 refugees I think we've taken in.
Okay.
It
seems like a lot more just like living here, but I'm not talking about like refugees. I'm just saying the past 10 years.
There's a big misconception about what is. Someone obviously just sees, I suppose, someone who doesn't look like them and they just presume that it's a refugee, but in all cases it's not always an actual refugee, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, for sure.
There's plenty of people, even I've come across it, say, I know some guys, people have looked, I've seen people look at them and they say, oh look, at more refugees. I'm like, no, that guy has an Irish accent. Just because he's different colour skin doesn't mean that he's not Irish. He was born here. And I think there's a big misconception in that not everyone who looks different to you is an actual refugee. And I think that there's been a big again, I think that the media has in some cases have blown out of proportion the amount that we've actually taken in. We haven't taken in a huge amount, to be quite honest.
Do you think the distinction between refugee and economic migrant is important to reinforce?
I suppose, obviously, a refugee is someone who's fleeing war or persecution, and an economic migrant is someone who, I suppose, is
looking for opportunities.
Opportunities, yeah. I also, but even, I don't think people realise, like, a report came out recently in Ireland that we need an extra 90,000 workers for the construction industry. So I think that we actually... People don't realise we need a lot more economic migrants than people are actually making it. We need 90,000 people to maintain our construction industry at the rate it's growing.
That's an interesting point. I hadn't heard that, and I'm sure we could source labour for particular tasks, and they wouldn't have to be permanent residents, because I feel we really do have an infrastructure problem in this country, and it's not only an Irish problem. I feel it is throughout the Western world at the moment, because obviously a lot of people want to come here because we have resource and we have things going on, essentially, but we do not yet have the infrastructure, and I think that if we have open border policies without preparing the infrastructure and just, have this country essentially turn into a free-for-all, that does not bode well for future generations or the economy or socio-cultural integrity of the country.
Yeah, I think even, like, you look at... we saw recently, was it up in Roscommon, the Leitrim border Roscommon, where they burned down a hotel? That was going to hold refugees, but the thing that needs to be put in place for these refugees is, like, we don't know how, like, there needs to be things put in place so that we can learn them how to speak Irish, or not Irish, sorry, English, and preferably if they wanted to speak Irish, that'd be great. There's not enough Irish speakers in Ireland, but I think we need to put systems in place where they can adapt to Ireland and to Irish culture, and I suppose to be fully integrated into society. And I think that's somewhere where the government is failing, that they're not putting the correct things in place for these people to assimilate into Irish society.
Yeah. About the direct provision centres, they aren't actually only for refugees, because there are people coming from Nigeria staying in direct provision centres. There are people coming from all over, from countries where they're not technically refugees, but they're just migrants who are coming here who don't necessarily have the need to come here. It's more of just opportunism, I think of it as. So
I suppose you have Boko Haram too, was kind of ravaging northern Nigeria. So I don't know the breakdown of the amount of Nigerians who would be economic migrants versus refugees, but I would certainly say that some of them would be, a large proportion would be refugees with the Boko Haram ravaging the country.
I would dispute that it would be a large portion. I would agree with you that some of them could classify as refugees, but I don't think either of us have the facts and figures here, so maybe we can move on to a different point. Let's see. Do you have any points of view or issues or thoughts generally about international politics and the way things are going, and what you would like to see happen, or what you are seeing happening that you're not super happy about?
I think that international politics at the moment is just kind of up in the air, I suppose, with the election of Trump has been polarising for people. Brexit, I suppose we're seeing the EU break down with even with I suppose the rise of France. Yep, currently look what's happening in France. That's a rejection of I suppose the political class and the
international bankers. I mean, Macron literally worked for the Rothschild banking dynasty, and then I don't know if you know this, the Rothschild banking dynasty run the carbon credit trading industry on planet Earth, and one of Macron's first major policies was to put a huge fuel tax, which was a carbon credit tax, which was going directly to his Rothschild masters. I mean, that is so beyond dystopian. I can barely even get over its reality.
Macron really pulled the wool over the French population's eyes by saying that he was anti-establishment. He was the finance minister. He was the finance minister. Like, come on, how
an ex-banker, ex-Rothschild banker? No, the connections.
He was he was the political elite. Like it was ridiculous. It was the greatest fallacy, and it was pure opportunism that he saw a hollowed middle ground and he went for it, and he's been uncovered, thankfully.
Yeah, great point. About the housing crisis and the homeless crisis in Ireland, I personally see that as a direct result of unchecked mass migration. Would you agree or disagree on that point?
I would disagree.
And what would you attribute it to?
I suppose, again, obviously in 2008 there was a complete breakdown of the construction industry. That obviously didn't help. And even in 2014 in Cork, there was one social house built. Again, there was just complete... Since the 1980s, the governments, the continuous government of Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael kind of just gave up on building social housing. I think that's a massive reason why we saw... And obviously, again, the soaring rent prices.
Oh yeah, I think the soaring rent prices, though, are just a result of there being such demand that, the prices keep increasing because everybody needs a house. I mean, I'm living with my family currently because I couldn't find anywhere, I couldn't afford anywhere.
That's the thing, yeah. Even we're seeing, by legislation, supposedly under the rent pressure zones, rent can only increase at 4% per annum, but that's not happening. We're seeing in UCC now, students have got I think the students have been told that on UCC apartments that the rent is going up by €592. That's surely over 4%.
Yeah, it would seem to be. Let me think. Yeah, as far as infrastructure, I 100% agree with you. We need to be building more. There are so many underdeveloped areas around the city and on the outskirts of every city around this country. What do you think is the responsible for the lack of initiative in creating new infrastructure while at the same time inviting so many new people to come live here?
See, I find that to be it's a very difficult question to answer, right? I don't know why there hasn't been. Even if you look at the North Ring Road up in the north side, if that was actually done, it would make it so easy. You could drive from Mayfield to Ballincollig and just bypass the whole city, and it would just be such an infrastructural boost for the north side. You could work out in the EMC in Ballincollig and live in Mayfield, and the commute would be so much easier, and the economic benefits that would have. But it just doesn't seem to be. There doesn't seem to be political will there to do it. I don't know why that is. I suppose people seem to be keep voting in the same people, so why would they? Why would they improve the infrastructure when they're getting voted back in anyway?
Yeah, I see a real problem with nepotism in politics in this country, and the people who are in the positions of power are neglecting their duties to take care of the country and be stewards of the state as they should be.
Yeah. RTDs are glorified local county councillors. Exactly. They're debating potholes up in the Dáil. No, they should. It's a national legislator. That's what our county councils are for. We need to give more power to the county councils so our national legislators can be national legislators.
So you would like to see power being more localized again?
Excuse me. Yeah, you're good. Yeah, I suppose I would like to see the principle of subsidiarity implemented, where all power is devolved to the lowest level, where it can be filled out. I suppose to the level that it should be. I think that would take away a lot of the needlessness that goes on up in the Dáil, and they can actually be national legislators then.
Fantastic, Jamie. It's been great talking to you. Thanks you for your time very much. It's been real. Yeah, thank you very much, my man. If you appreciate what I'm doing and the content I'm creating, hit that like button, subscribe, hit the little bell thing, donate, and stay tuned. There's a lot more on the way.